Hello. So it's a real pleasure to welcome here Mara Ambrizic and to talk about school and specifically about art school. Unfortunately, I mean we cannot have a couple, as you see, as sort of a ping-pong match because Marcus Petrini unfortunately really does apologize, but had an inconvenience, so he had to just to fastly rush to Turin for a problem to the exhibition he's working at the moment. So I will make sort of a ping-pong with Madame Ambrizic as a kind of interview. So even if I'm not, one of the speakers, I will just not leave Mara alone, climb another. Okay. Oh, it's really high, huh?
It's high, yes.
It's high, yes. So, just a few words to introduce Mara to the audience. So, Madame Ambrizic is curator, art critic, and lecturer. She graduated at the University in Venice, and where she also taught for 4 years, from 2008 to 2012. In 2007, she curated, the Slovenian Pavilion at the Venice Biennial. And during 2008 and 2012, she was curator of the project Art Enclosure, residency for international artist residents in Venice. In fall 2012, she was visiting lectures at the University of Sciences Po, how do you say? Sciences Po. My French is just horrible, not existing at all. Together with Angela Vettese, she is now editor of an upcoming book that is somehow crucial for us, that is called Art as a Thinking Process, so these visual forms of knowledge production that will be published by Stanford Press in 2013. So, let's talk about art school. I would just try to use your knowledge as much as possible today. Because Mara explored the topic of art school in a very broad scenario. And so I would like to ask you, thinking about the last 5 or 7 or 8 years, art schools are underway a process of transformation. Things are changing, in terms of the educational system and the kind of structure through which the art schools are organized somehow. So I would like to ask you if you could somehow tell us something about this process of transformation that really took place in Europe in our schools.
Yes. The thing here to underline in the first instance is that in the past decade there were art schools and educational platforms that were developed, particularly in Europe, that were somehow posing a huge question mark on what it is, the experimental side that an art school within its new confirmation might somehow open in a wider discourse of the transformation of the artistic institutional spaces. Now, what I had experienced in Italy, because as you told, I'm sort of coming out of an experiment, of one of the most interesting public experiments in Italy, if not to say in Europe, which was called, unfortunately, I'm using the past because things have changed thanks to certain reforms occurred in the European context. The Faculty of Arts and Design of the University of Venice, the only public, I'm here underlining the fact that it's not a private school, that it's a public school, or only public art school that introduced an extremely experimental format in terms of teaching of artistic educational platforms, giving space to a multidisciplinary approach. Now I'm not going to speak about the fact that it was opened to performative arts, design, and graphic design, I will just focus on the fact that we've been there within the graduate course program in visual arts. We've been facing already 2006 and 2007, somehow in the same year when the first debates around what was happening in art schools in Europe was somehow emerging, first with a project that appeared as an article in Freeze 2007, a reflection conducted by Oki and Zewar. Then, immediately after 2007, as a project of Anton Bidokel that became a potential academy that never happened, never occurred in Nicosia for political problems. And immediately after, what we started to think within a group of lecturers, artists, didactic assistants, curators, thinkers, philosophers. And here I'm making a list because this is the quality of figures that are somehow intertwining and also contributing to this multidisciplinary way of working within an experimental platform. So in 2007, within the graduate course of visual arts in Venice, we started to think that we might conjoin the forces with schools, 12, 13, 14 schools in Europe, now I'm just coming to the answer, that were somehow facing the same thing that we were facing in Venice. The impact of the Bologna reform on the master and the baccalaureates and master courses, and their pressure on somehow driving through this process and reform to homogenization of educational platforms. Why is that so important? That's important because within the past 10 years, we have seen, especially in marginal contexts like Utrecht, Dublin, London, the Slade School of Arts, now I'm gonna Gratcam, MAC, Utrecht, the same school of design and arts in Stockholm. I mean, there are many others. It's part of what we then call European Artistic Research Network. Very similar models that were somehow introducing a way of experimenting within the educational platforms, visual arts, an extremely open experimental approach based on a laboratory type practice, which means bringing into the school professionals, artists, curators that that were somehow approaching the production of knowledge and the production of art via different formats, not as a as a teacher towards a student, but as through a process of learning by doing, or vice versa, doing by learning. This is what happened in Europe, in which we started to reflect with the first symposium that was organized in Venice through this group of schools that was called Becoming Bologna, and it was namely trying to understand what was happening in Europe at that time. How would the Bologna process change this singular, small formats? We are speaking about small schools, not huge universities, but really somehow experimental arenas for a multidisciplinary approach. This leads to then to a longer process of reflection that is also somehow reflected was reflected in 2011, sorry, and that marked also that, I have to show this, that marked the 10 years of an experiment in Venice, the Faculty of Arts and Design, that celebrated 10 years of its existence. Again, I have really to say that was an extraordinary model, public model, where we started also to reflect, on a wider scale, how these platforms, these educational platforms, by bringing into also other cases from overseas, from the States and bigger universities, which then became an international meeting that gave gave somehow the background to the book that is coming out this term.
A very long one.
He's the moderator. I mean, I have to speak. He's the moderator. You should stop me. Okay, this is.
She arrived at the point. Is it working?
Is it?
Is it? Is it or not? No? Okay.
So, okay, no, it was a long story, I mean, and you mentioned the experimental approach of learning by doing by learning. I mean, you mentioned the UVA, you know, as an interesting case studies of experimental platform to teach art. Something about, you know, today and money. Let's talk about this topic, money and school. I mean, we have seen that in New York, Cooper Unions, you know, there is an art school free of charge now, is charging students with tuition. We have seen that, you know, fees in UK or in the context of, you know, the United States are growing and rising. And so education costs and neoliberalization process are underway somehow. We've seen that there are phenomena like, you know, academies from below as a sort of reaction to this kind of pressure on the education system in art. I mean, how do you see this kind of situation of academies from below and the problem of, you know, the school as a public space or not?
I'll try to be shorter now. Yes, this is exactly what we tried to reflect also in the book together with Angela, that somehow put in this topic too, and this is linked to a very, I mean, to a particular conceptual dimension. It's the conception of freedom of thinking and freedom of learning and freedom of doing. Of course, what is happening right now, and this is not, it's not only the European case. Well, as I said, I mean, here we are facing an extraordinary pressure on the reformation of public schools in Europe, which is driven by a trend that is global and that is imposing a new way of imagining education, which goes directly with what was also published, I mean, in a very interesting article in Internationale some months ago, the process of corporativization of schools, which is not touching only the dimension of the artistic or the designer, I mean, whatever the creativity field, it's investing, I mean, literally the new forms of producing a particular knowledge that through the agency of corporations, I mean, of bigger investors, is definitely, I mean, somehow responding to what will be the trends of the next decades in terms of the market, I mean, of the global market. Let's call it global market. So, what I think in terms of let's say the alternative schools, so those formations that started years ago with in the agency of providing spaces, like as a Cooper Union. But we have these examples in Europe. There are quite several. I will mention one, which is in Ljubljana. It's DPU, the Workers and Parks University, that was founded by the government, but within the austerity process that is, all the countries here are undergoing. It's on the tree. What does it mean on the tree? It means that in order to be able to access to a particular knowledge or to access to experimental spaces, to spaces where you're giving the chance to experiment what? Specifically that, thinking, because whatever form of thinking brings also a product. And this product is art. This is coming to us from Leonardo, but I mean, John Davis is saying that, I mean, what is here at stake is that within the field of artistic experimentation, creation, innovation, and freedom of expression, we are somehow part of a vortex that is driving us into a direction where you would want the access to this. You would slowly have to be able to fund it by yourself. And this is not only the case for the schools. I mean, this is the case for a bunch of other activities that are related to culture. I mean, we are facing a transformation of cultural policies in Europe is dramatic, but I mean, we can just take a few examples from the States, and we might see what will happen very soon, very quickly also in Europe.
Talking about, I would like to just shift a little bit the conversation from, I mean, we're talking about, you know, the reaction as you mentioned, of the educational system to this kind of neoliberalism nowadays. But I would also talk a little bit about space, you know, all these experimental forms of, I'd say, art system in relation to space. You made a nice, somehow, survey on artist residencies. Without, in a way, a topic related to education, but also to a new kind of idea of living or experience himself or herself as the artist and in relation to the practice.
Yes, this is something in which I mean, I've been really faced with the question of how can you invent a space, a physical space, when you don't have one? I mean, this was the case of Venice. Or to reformulate it, how can you join the forces with actors that are present in a context, in a locality, and you develop through putting them in collaboration, you develop a platform without having a sort of a sort of building or something that has everything inside, which is not really the case in Italy. So how you invent a residency program for people coming from outside, I mean, international artists, in our case, there were artists coming from the African continent. And give them support, you put them in the condition to collaborate with students, to collaborate with actors, I mean, the cultural actors of this Venetian locality. How you put in collaboration, how you bring into a dimension, collaborative dimension, different institutions with them, associations, Fondazione Guidacco Lamazza, Fondazione di Venezia, the university. So how can you imagine a production of projects that are linked, and they're responding to a particular characteristics of Venice, which means bringing into the history of Venice, bringing in the reinvention of the present through this collaborative thing. I mean, this is possible. The problem is problems of funding in Italy. Yet we didn't have this problem. It wasn't that pressing. And through the residency and through this sort of bringing in all these actors, imagine a residency program that takes in consideration also processes of a laboratory type approach. I mean, it takes also from the experience of an experimental art school.
If you should mention some of these places, I mean, that you consider somehow interesting nowadays, some of, artist residency program that are challenging the relation between education, practice, and the idea of.
Well, the survey, here the survey, so this is not really something that, it's a bunch, there is a list of them. So I'll have to mention something that I visited recently. This is the Villa Arson in Nice, in France, it's perfect. It might be a perfect case. I mean, a perfect European case to address. Then we have, I mean, which has an art school, a research library, I mean, a research group supporting artists, apartments and residency programs, bringing in people from outside, working with students, presenting, exhibiting, while, I mean, shifting, intertwining projects of established artists with projects of students, and so on. I mean, with a public program of conferences, which is very important. So, have the think tank, the laboratory type work, the exhibition moment, and the public, and the confrontation with the public. This is, I mean, an extremely interesting model. Then we have definitely to mention the agency of certain projects that are directed by the Doren Foundation from Amsterdam, which are providing support for residents, I mean, for different kind of projects, I mean, going from social to artistic, bringing in different, I mean, people from different disciplines. And this is also interesting, where you have scientists, public figures, politicians working with artists, I mean, bringing really in different disciplines. Directly sponsoring residency projects that are developed in the third world countries. This is an interesting model that is led by it's coming from Netherlands. The raw material company in Dakar, it's one of those residencies that I would definitely mark as one of those that are somehow bringing together processes of knowledge production, because this is a space which works as a sort of independent school, even though school is not really the right. It's an art institution, but it's devoted to social invention, to knowledge production, through the agency of artists, so raw material company, and there are several others just mentioned.
Thanks a lot. We are looking forward for the book. So now we should, we should have continued for many hours. But so we're looking forward to getting more information on these. And thanks a lot. Tomorrow.